We now move on to session 2. I invite Ms. Divya Sandil, Senior Researcher, Sustainable Transportation, CAG, to moderate the second session on empowering citizens through climate literacy, knowledge for action. Divya, please take it away.
Thank you, Mala. Good afternoon, everyone. And I'm happy to welcome you to session 2, Empowering Citizens Through Climate Literacy, Knowledge for Action. So now the question exists that why is it important to empower citizens, right? Empowering citizens with climate literacy is extremely vital for creating a proactive and informed society. It helps individuals make informed decisions about their lifestyle, fosters community engagement in local sustainability initiatives, and equips people to advocate for effective climate policies. Understanding climate change impacts also helps communities build resilience against disasters and cultivates a sense of global responsibility. I think this is a theme that has been an underlying theme throughout every one of the speakers' sessions. Together, let's explore how we can bridge the gap between knowledge and action to create a more climate literate society. So let's get started. I'm happy to introduce our first speaker, Ms. Mala Balaji. She is a researcher with the Environment and Climate Action team at CAG, where she works on environmental issues and climate action. She is currently developing a climate change curriculum for school students. With an All India 28th rank in cost accounting and an MBA in finance, Mala brings a strong academic background and analytical experience to her work. She has contributed to impactful research and authored key reports, including an in-depth analysis of environment, social, and governance disclosure by public sector power companies in Tamil Nadu, CSR funds utilization and human rights adherence by industries in Tamil Nadu, and understanding carbon credits and offsets in India, and analysis of key mechanisms. Her professional experience includes roles as a systems analyst at Toronto Dominion Bank, Canada, and as an educator and administrator at the International Indian School, Saudi Arabia. She strongly believes in the value of giving back to society. Thank you, Mala, for joining us. I'm honored to introduce our second speaker for the session, Dr. Alfonso George, an assistant professor and program coordinator for the BSc Psychology Honors Program at Christ University, Bangalore. She holds a PhD in applied psychology from Pondicherry University, specializing in environmental psychology and conservation behaviors. Dr. Joe's research focuses on the psychological factors influencing eco-friendly behaviors and sustainable living. As the faculty lead at Climate Lab, she explores the intersection of environmental psychology and climate action. She has published extensively in journals and contributed to book chapters on topics related to environmental and positive psychology. With a background in both clinical and industrial psychology, she brings a well-rounded perspective to her work. Her academic expertise and practical insights make her a valuable speaker on sustainability and psychology. Thank you, Dr. Alfonso, for joining us today. Lastly, but not the least, I'm honored to introduce Ms. Sadika Tiwari. Ms. Sadika is an award-winning multimedia journalist with nearly a decade of experience with leading news outlets. She is currently the host of Eco India, a show on climate solutions with an international TV news channels, Deutsche Welle, DW News. Thank you. Based out of Europe. She has previously worked with NDTV 24/7, The Quint, India Spend, and Beijing Box. She's a TEDx speaker, a member of the Oxford Climate Journalism Network, recipient of the prestigious Ladli Award for her gender reporting and the Van Ifra Award. She also takes guest lectures and journalism workshops in India's leading journalism colleges. Her reporting is focused on telling the stories of people, especially from India's hinterland, with politics, conflict, climate change, and gender at the center. Please join me in welcoming her to the podium. We will begin by discussing why climate literacy matters and how to help citizens make sustainable choices by Mala Balaji.
Thank you, Divya. So every time you switch on the TV or read the newspaper headlines, there's news of an extreme weather event happening somewhere or the other. May it be floods, heat waves, cyclones, it's all over the news. And it's impossible to ignore. The increasing frequency and intensity of these events are clear indicators of the impacts of climate change. So with this in mind, let me share an anecdote on a slightly different note. Just last week, my husband went to the market. I had given him a list of things to buy. And then he came back with the list and the things, and also a dozen of mangoes, ripe mangoes. And he was so excited about it. He said, see, Sendura mangoes. And, but wait, mangoes in December, really, it's unheard of. So mangoes are typically a summer treat between April to July. Ideally, that's when we were getting mangoes. But like out of curiosity, we just tried those mangoes and it was not bad at all. It was like pretty sweet. While this delighted my husband, it left me uneasy. If plants are confused with their cycles disrupted, how deeply is climate change impacting our ecosystems? So this is a serious note which we need to look into. This is where, for we as individuals, climate literacy becomes essential. So what exactly is climate literacy? At its core, climate literacy means understanding the science behind climate change, its causes and consequences. But it actually goes beyond merely grasping scientific facts. Climate literacy is about recognizing how deeply interconnected all life forms are and understanding the critical role ecosystems play in sustaining a balanced and thriving planet. It empowers individuals to not only learn about climate science, but also to embrace a broader perspective on how human actions impact the environment and the urgent need to protect it. By fostering ecocentrism, we are advocating for an ethical philosophy that prioritizes the value of ecosystems and living beings over human needs. Climate literacy is also the ability to debunk climate myths and misinformation that is available widely on the internet and other social media platforms. A topic that my co-panelist Sadhika will be talking about during her turn. So now, moving on to the next slide. So we need to understand that activities like burning fossil fuels, deforestation, transportation, and excessive consumption significantly increase greenhouse gas emissions, which contribute to climate change. So so if you see the impacts of climate change, the one is rising sea levels. So melting glaciers and ice sheets, along with expansion of warmer ocean waters, are causing sea levels to rise. This in turn leads to coastal flooding, erosion, and also displacement of coastal communities living in low-lying areas. Then we also have extreme weather events, one of the impacts of climate change, like cyclones, heat waves, and floods. It's all over the news, we are seeing it. These disrupt lives, destroy infrastructure, and also impact economies. And then there's one more side effect of climate change, we can say that climate change is disrupting ecosystems, making it hard for any species to survive. This results in species extinction and also imbalances in ecosystems, affecting everything from food chains to natural resources. So this is a quick snapshot of climate change impacts in India. So if you see heat waves in 2024, India experienced around 554 heat wave days. That's a whopping 141% increase from 2023, with over 733 deaths and over 40,000 heat stroke cases reported. And then in 2024, the monsoon season also saw around 895 flood-related deaths. Floods affect approximately around 75 lakh hectares of land each year and result in damages estimated at over 1,805 crores to crops, homes, and public utilities. Then we also have droughts, which affect over 3.7 million hectares of cropped area each year. So by 2100, it's estimated that crop production is projected to drop by 40%. Wheat yields may also decline by 40% by 2080, and also rice yields could decrease by 47%. So these are the some of the statistics that highlight the adverse impacts of climate change on India's population, infrastructure, and food security. So now that we have established that climate change is affecting India and of course all over the world, let's explore actionable solutions as individuals to mitigate these challenges and build resilience. So moving on to the next slide. Yeah, the power of individual action. So basically, climate change might seem like a global challenge beyond individual influence, but collective small actions can also drive a significant change. So here's how we as individuals can contribute meaningfully. Some of the ways in which we can do this is energy conservation, sustainable transportation, water conservation, responsible consumption, and advocacy and civic engagement. So let us look into each of these topics in detail. Yeah. So we all know that large-scale systemic changes are necessary to address climate change, but individual actions can also make a significant impact. Here are some simple everyday actions to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. First is energy efficient appliances. So every time you go out to purchase either an air conditioner or a washing machine or a television, we need to look for energy efficient appliances. This we can measure by the high energy stars that they have. More the rating, they better their energy conservation. So that is one part which we can look into. Then we have energy efficient lighting. So switching to LED bulbs, which consume less energy and they also last longer. So that would be one good way to conserve energy. So to give you an interesting statistic on this, if just 25% of the Indian households switch to LEDs, the country could save over 20,000 crores annually in electricity bills and reduce 40 million tons of carbon dioxide emissions. This will aid significantly to climate action efforts. So one more thing what we can do is unplug electronics. So just unplugging, just switching off your electronics is not enough. We need to make sure that we unplug it from the socket. Because when not in use, even though if we switch off the devices, it is only if we unplug, we can reduce the phantom energy consumption. So this also has to be looked into. Apart from that, we have switching to renewable energy. Individuals can embrace renewable energy by installing solar panels at homes, reducing dependency on traditional electricity sources. This will help reduce the dependency on traditional electricity sources. So with the government offering subsidies on solar adoption, it is becoming more accessible these days. So imagine this, if just 10% of the Indian households installed a 3 kilowatt solar system, it could generate over 120 billion kilowatt per hour annually, enough to power more than 30 million homes for a year. So beyond cost savings on electricity bills, solar energy also helps cut emissions, contributing to cleaner air and a greener future. So these are some of the ways we can conserve energy. Now moving on to sustainable transportation. We all know that it is always advisable we could walk or cycle for shorter distances. Every time we need to go to the market which is nearby or something, we don't have to take our car out. We could just walk or cycle short distances. So this way we can reduce on the transportation emissions. Next, using public transport. Utilize public transportation whenever possible, for reducing emissions. So if you see a full bus can remove 50 cars from the road, easing congestion and also reducing emissions significantly. Now moving on to carpooling, we could share our rides with colleagues, neighbors or friends to minimize the number of cars on the road. So these are some of the ways in which we can look into sustainable transportation. Now, So next we move on to water conservation. In India, a nation facing the challenges of a rapidly growing population, urbanization, and environmental degradation, water conservation has become an urgent priority. So with 16% of the world's population, but only 4% of its fresh water resources, the need for sustainable water management is critical. So in Chennai alone, nearly 24 water bodies and wetlands once existed, but today only 8 remain. This is a stark reminder of the importance of protecting and conserving our water resources. So how can we as individuals contribute to water conservation? So, something simple as fixing your leaks. So even minor leaks waste a significant amount of water over a period of time. So repairing them promptly is one of the simplest way to conserve water. Also, we need to be mindful of our daily water use. Simple actions like turning off taps while brushing your teeth, taking shorter showers, and using just the right amount of water for cooking and cleaning collectively can make a huge impact. So next time when you want to wash your car, let's not take a hose out. Instead, we can use a bucket and cloth. That should suffice. So we need to be mindful of our daily water usage. Apart from that, we could adopt rainwater harvesting. So capturing and storing rainwater is an excellent way to recharge groundwater. This will reduce the dependency on freshwater sources and also make use of an otherwise wasted resource. So homes can be equipped with a rainwater harvesting mechanism to effectively utilize rainfall and ensure sustainable water management. Next, we also have responsible consumption. So this is one topic which really needs to look into. So over the past 2 or 3 decades, globalization and industrialization have significantly altered consumption patterns. So mass production and opening up global markets have made products cheaper and more accessible, contributing to the normalization of disposable goods. Consumerism, fueled by peer pressure and aggressive marketing, has encouraged people to equate material wealth with success, often leading to the purchase of unnecessary items. Additionally, the growing focus on convenience has prioritized short-term use over durability, eroding repair and reuse practices and exacerbating waste. So these impacts of the impacts of this shift are profound. Overconsumption is depleting our natural resources at an unsustainable rate, accelerating environmental degradation. So the widespread adoption of disposable goods has resulted in increasing amounts of non-biodegradable waste and e-waste adding on to the pollution. Furthermore, the production, transportation, and disposal of these goods significantly contribute to the global carbon footprint, intensifying the climate crisis. So what can we do to move from this? We could reduce, we need to remember the 5 R's, which are refuse, reduce, reuse, repair, and recycle. So minimize waste by refusing the use of plastic, reducing consumption, reusing items by repairing them instead of going for new products every time, and also recycling materials. So to give you a picture of the amount of waste generated in India, India generates over 62 million tons of waste every year. Only 43 million tons of total waste generated gets collected, with 12 million tons being treated before disposal. And the remaining 31 million tons are simply discarded in the waste yards. So that's how huge our solid waste management problem is. So by reducing consumption, reusing items, and recycling materials, we can significantly reduce waste and conserve resources. And there's one more thing about supporting local businesses. So buying local products reduces transportation emissions. Purchasing from local businesses helps strengthen the local economy. Studies have shown that for every 100 rupees spent on local businesses, approximately 68 rupees stays in the community. This compared to over only 43 when spent on a chain store. So we need to support local businesses. So now moving on to advocacy and civic engagement. So advocacy and civic engagement are essential tools for driving social and environmental change. Advocacy involves actively supporting or promoting causes that align with the public good, influencing policies, and raising awareness about critical issues. Civic engagement, on the other hand, refers to the participation of individuals in decision-making processes and actions that impact their communities. So how can we do that? One way to do it is like by joining an environmental organization. We could become a member of an NGO or an environmental organization working on climate change issues. We could also write to elected officials. So we could contact our local state representatives to express our concerns about climate change and urge them to support climate-friendly policies. So how do we go about supporting climate-friendly policies? So this is where you need to cast your vote judicially. So we need to vote for candidates that prioritize climate action and support policies that reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We should also educate others. So sharing information about climate change with your friends, family, and community is of utmost importance as well. So this should be an everyday conversation, everyday dining table conversation. So this is one way how we can help in advocacy. Next, we have community outreach and awareness campaigns. This is also an important aspect of civic engagement. So community organizations, NGOs, and government agencies play a vital role in raising awareness about climate change. They can organize workshops, seminars, and public events to educate the public about the issue. By partnering with schools, businesses, and local governments, these organizations can create a network of stakeholders committed to climate action. Social media and other digital platforms have emerged as powerful tools these days for spreading information and mobilizing people. So by using these platforms effectively, we can reach to a wider audience and engage people in climate discussions. So sharing informative content, creating eye-catching visuals are some of the ways in which we can help raise awareness and inspire action. So by combining individual actions with community outreach and digital advocacy, we can create a climate literate society that is prepared to address the challenges of the 21st century. So remember, every action, no matter how small, contributes to the larger goal of mitigating climate change. So with this, I come to the end of my presentation. I just would like to end by saying, together we can make a significant impact in building a climate resilient future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mala, for that invaluable session on what informed actions individuals can take and how that our actions have consequences not just for ourselves, but for the entire planet. Now that the lens is on us as individuals, now let's move on to learning how to cope with the stress, with the eco-anxiety. I invite Dr. Alfonso George as our next speaker on coping with eco-anxiety, the different strategies and the support that's available.
Very good afternoon, one and all present here. Very good afternoon. Yes. Okay. So I think it's been a long time that you were listening to a lot of these sessions. And okay, before I begin to this, where I'm starting to discuss about climate anxiety, probably I want you to do a very small activity. Okay. Can you all raise your right index finger up like this? Just raise your up. Okay. And then follow my instructions. Okay. So then now look at your index finger, the tip of it. Move it to your forehead. Move it to your forehead. Okay, so keep it there and then keep looking. Okay, and then move it down to your nose. Further down to your chin. Okay, to your chin. Okay, how many of your fingers are on the cheek right now? Just as mine? Okay, there are few people. And then there are very smart few people. Okay, thank you. There are very few smart people who reach the chin exactly. Okay, so this is what happens when we end up following mindlessly. Okay, sometimes we end up going with what is easily available, and then there are people who are very judicious, and then I'm very happy to see all the young kids who are there. They were very judicious. They were all rightly pointing to their Chico chin. Chin, okay, yes. Okay, so with that we'll start our discussion about climate anxiety and other questions of mental health, and also to discuss what we can do in our capacity in order to mitigate this mental health related concerns. So as ma'am mentioned in the beginning that I come from a psychology background. I'm an associate professor of psychology in Christ University, Bangalore. And also I'm heading the program BSc Psychology Honors in my campus. So there a lot of this discussion related to climate, mental health, the concerns related to climate comes up in our everyday discussion. One or the other day there will be students come and share this kind of insights or maybe their experience. And then the first thing I remember I heard from my own student was that, okay, one student came to me, he has got a lot of interest in film, and then there he came and told me, ma'am, I'm thinking of making a short film, which is a science fiction kind, where my character, the main leading character, was a girl in her teenage, and then she has a particular condition. She gets very much touched by the season, okay, so the climatic condition. And then he said, okay, it's little negative, the story is little negative, but I want people to be aware. Okay, so that's what he's coming and telling me. And then he's telling me that, okay, now what happens when the climatic condition varies a lot? There is a condition that she goes through. She loses interest in her everyday activity, and then she decides to commit suicide because she feels like she can't manage the stress and then all of the issue that is happening along this climate concern. He told me this as if it's a science fiction story. And then I told him, okay, see, this is what we call as climate anxiety or eco-anxiety or eco-guilt, which is already there, which has already been studied, which has already been clearly depicted. Okay, so somebody who is thinking about it, I'm telling how in their creativity, imagination that they are bringing this story, and then we are seeing that this is already happening. So like that, there are a lot of instances where we do discuss about climate change and mental health in our everyday scenario. So that is what kind of interested me in this particular context also to discuss about climate change. Okay, so moving further, this is a bit of my own research I'm presenting. So here we were trying to see, myself and my research scholar for that matter, we were trying to see how much of our Indian population is really worried or concerned about climate change in India. So what we did, we didn't have our own data, so we kind of depended on the existing data. There were data available from Pew Research Center as well as Yale Climate Research Center. And then we have used those data from 2006 to 2020 to see how this climate concern or worry is being captured, or maybe are people really worried about climate change in India. And also, this is in a context where we do not have a lot of Indian literature available, where we do not have a scientific studies available which talks about climate concern within India. So in this context, when we analyze the data, we could actually see in 2006, out of all the participants, only 2.6% of people were telling that they are worried about climate concern, or maybe in a list of problems that they think is important or which requires immediate attention, climate change was coming in the last part. That was not a concern at that point in time. But by the time of 2020, so how many years? 2006 to 2020. 14 years, right? Yeah. So it is not even 2 decades. Within that, we can see 89.5% of people became reporting that they are worried or they are concerned about climate change. So we have this climate concern or worry, or maybe at least we are aware of all of these things. Okay, so when we become aware, what do we think? Okay, we know that there is a very pretty much big danger that is there, and then we are aware of it, what do we do? What do we do if, in case if there is a tiger entering to this room? What do we do? We'll run, right? Yeah, we'll try to do something and then escape. But again, why that is not transforming into climate action? So we know that it is something that is important. There is a lot of changes that are occurring, which is worrisome, which is going to be a threat. Still, we are not doing much about it. We are doing, I'm not saying that complete negation, but again, not to the extent the opposition is powerful, we are not doing. Okay, so there, we wanted to see what happens in that context. Okay, so why there is difficulties. So there we can see a lot of studies tell us that, okay, we all have a very, very ancient brain, to be honest. Our neocortex is not, that is this part of our brain where we say all our logical reasoning, our critical thinking and all comes in. It is not very old, okay. Considering our evolutionary period, this part is not very old. It is, that's why we call it as neocortex, something that is new. So our neocortex is there, but beyond that, what is very, very active? Our previous reptilian, or maybe we can say our ancient brain parts, where emotions do rule rather than our rational, or maybe our, what do you say, very information based things that is being taking a position. So we get, that is why I asked the question tiger, and then we know that it is something that is fearsome. So we have to run. So automatically our system 2 get activated, where we take a very quick decision. But again, in the other case, when it is a very new thing, like climate change, which we are not familiar with, which might not happen at this time, it might not attack you at this point in time, we are discounting the temporal aspect of it. So when we are discounting the temporal aspect of it, we find it very difficult to act to it. We think that, okay, there might be someone else, or it might not be true, or there might be some other ways to tackle it. So we end up coming up with one or the other way, discount that particular risk associated with that climate change. So there is a lot of discussion like that where we do talk about it, and then one of this is our cognitive barriers. We have this cognitive barriers in place, and then that will make us or prevent us or barricade us from taking the action in the context. So like that, there are a lot of discussion why climate change or climate awareness is not getting converted into climate action. And at the same time, there is another element that we are finding out, or that we are, okay, again, this is another point I want to tell you. So how that this concern and worry do vary. So concern is a broad concept. Okay, I can be concerned about many things. But again, when it becomes skin depth to me, I'll become more worried about it. So that emotional element is coming in the context of worry. So that emotional element, where I said emotional element will help us in taking a what decision? Very delayed decision or quick decision? What kind of decision we'll take? Context, tiger entering the room. Quick or delayed? Quick, yeah, ma'am is like quick, yeah. Yes, so then that emotional element is coming in the context of worry. So then also in that line, I'm telling you a little bit more about climate and emotion. How does that happen? So this is another study that is being conducted across many different countries, and then they were trying to see that two researchers, Rehdans and Madison B. They were trying to see how the temperature variation is affecting happiness levels of different country or maybe different people. So there we could see, depending upon the regular weather of that place, temperature variation is affecting people in different lines. So we can connect this result to how Trump was telling, okay, our winters are getting much, much colder now rather than it is becoming hot. Okay, where people perceive it or where they associate their happiness or their satisfaction to the level, what is the temperature change about? If the cold country becoming coldest, there they associate it to unhappy thing. And again a hot area or hot country becoming again hotter, there it becomes again an unhappy thing. So there that emotional element kick in. Otherwise people are happy. They don't want to act upon it. So there again, when we say climate change brings this kind of change in our understanding or change in our experience on our skin, but again we cannot expect all the time the same kind of effect. So it all depends in what context and how this is happening. So I'm coming from Bangalore. So there last March onwards, it was very difficult. We had drought-like condition. Anyway, we are all dependent on this water that is being provided by the municipality that is there, the BBMP. So that is there. But again, still we had this condition. And my area was never an affected area, but still listening to the news, and as much and more I'm consuming the news, I am becoming more and more conscious. I'm like, every drop of this water is becoming so precious. And then I'm like, this should rain, it should rain, it should rain. I don't know what kind of pressure I'm going through at that point in time. So there and all, we can see very quickly that climate-related element, how it is impacting. That depends what kind of an emotion that we do feel in the setting. So what happens in this setting? We cannot just go by the numbers and then say that, okay, temperature is this much, but still the happiness is okay. Or temperature is this down, but still the happiness is okay. Because it depends. What we started becomes what is our original arbitrary point becomes very, very important when we are trying to understand climate change and then the emotional responses there in the context. Okay, so this is again another work which we have done. It is not yet published, it is under review. So here we are trying to see climate change risk perception. In what context people do perceive risk of climate change. So there we could see again affect or our emotion becomes a very important predictor of climate change. That means how much you experience it, how much you consider it as something that is scary, or maybe scary is a very, very emotional term, okay, something that is requiring additional attention at least. In that context, or maybe when you have a personal experience, I said my own context of that not having enough water, or at least the news that there is water shortage in our area, that created that kind of a feeling, okay, I should do something. And then when ma'am was presenting, I was actually noting down that point, where I felt like, okay, we should be doing something about it. And then what we did, okay, we have the RO purifier, which will be just like that wasting water. We decided, okay, we'll put one extra bucket, we'll store that water, and then use it for washing the utensils at least. Okay, that water is saved. Somewhere we are doing something in that context to, at least to make us feel like we did something, one bit of ours. Okay, so likewise, where there is a personal experience or where there is an affect or an emotion, that will be leading to this climate change risk perception. And also, they are also associated with, so again, how our society is perceiving. That is what we say as prescriptive norms. How do our society perceive this are all important. So for example, I'm sharing this thing and then probably people are like, you're mad or what? Some way, somehow people will do things and then it will get settled. Why are you getting so much worried about this? If this is the response I'm getting from almost all the people around me, what will I do? Will I be again worried about it? Again, at least one bit, at least my worry will get subsided, or maybe I will become like, okay, I am overthinking in this context. I might think like that. So definitely, our prescriptive norms also become very, very important. Whether our community, our people, our parents, our teachers, our systems, if it is aware of this, and then they tell us, okay, this is important, that will be helping us to continue our action, or maybe at least understand there is risk. So we said about concern, then we said about worry, then we said, okay, you bring the emotional element and then it might become that worry, and then one step further, we need to see whether there is a risk in the context. So there is climate change risk perception that is coming in there. Okay, so all of this is in place. Let that be there. I'm introducing you to another element. So, okay, imagine like you are in this kind of a setting where there is very lush green forest, there is very clean water, and you can imagine maybe in the background there are birds chirping, and then very lit, sunlit place. In that place, imagine that place you are in, and then write 2 words that comes to your mind. How will you be feeling? Write those 2 words. Try describing your feeling if you are there in this kind of a setting in just 2 words. Just write down 2 words. I'll ask any 2 words that comes to your mind if you are in a place like this. That last one, the green, lush green, and then that water flowing. Okay, one more person. Heaven, heaven-like feeling. Yes, one more person. Nature's gift. Stress-free, okay, definitely. So like that, when we look at a very urban environment where there is a lot of pollution, or maybe a disaster-prone area, it all evoke a different kind of emotion in us. So nature evoke emotions. That is the whole idea of environmental emotions. But again, in that line, climate-related emotions, we can call it, there are solastalgia, there is eco-anxiety, there is eco-guilt, which created another byproduct which is known as reproductive guilt as well. So solastalgia is associated with your own homeland, the place that you've been, and then it is drastically going for a change and then you can't do much about it. That is the distress produced by an environmental change impacting on people while they are directly connected to their home environment. So this is another environmental emotion. Then there is this eco-anxiety, where people feel like, okay, we are going to have a very bad condition here. There is going to be a doom, that fear about that environmental doom. Okay. Then we have this guilt. Okay, I could have done this, but I didn't do. That will result in a guilt-like feeling. I could have reduced my consumption. I could have taken an auto. Sorry, I could have taken a walk instead of taking an auto. So like that, where I feel like I could have done this, but I didn't do. That will lead to eco-guilt. So all of this will create this issue of climate anxiety, or all of this will reflect in the context of climate anxiety. Again, I have certain limitation with the time, so I will be going very quickly here. So climate anxiety is that feeling that where we have a lot of concern about changing climate and then we are worried about it. And then at times it might come to a level where you're experiencing similar to a major depressive symptom, where you are not able to function properly in your everyday setting, or you have impaired emotions. You are not able to be happy, you are not able to be satisfied in the setting, or you are so very concerned about everything. And then all of this is impairing your performance. That is what we call it as climate anxiety. So then again, literature speaks about what can be done in the setting to tackle climate anxiety. And one of the famous literature clearly talks about how it is important to come together and then take up climate action in a group, not an individual action like switching off the light, but again coming together like this, standing for a cause like this, which is comparatively large scale, high impact behaviors. Those are expected to mitigate a lot of this climate anxiety. Okay, so this is our own lab, climate lab, which I am heading in the Department of Psychology. There we try to engage in climate research. There we try to generate primary research data and then generate inferences from the data. And then we try to tackle human behavior or individual action focused solutions for climate change. So like this, there can be, this is another example from Yale University, and then what are their climate lab focusing on. Like this, when people are coming together and acting on things, that will be very much helpful. And then another probable measure that can be taken by people is climate journaling or climate justice journaling. There it is more or less about you write down, how you write down in diary, you write down your experiences related to climate change or maybe your climate anxiety. And then there, basically it will become a very clear reflection for you whether you need to be worried about, or it might help you to build and connect certain dots which will be helping you to draw a conclusion in the setting. Then there is another concept which is known as climate cafe. This is like any other cafe where you will come and have your coffee or maybe your snacks. Here you will come over a coffee or a tea that you will end up discussing about your own personal concerns about climate change. Okay, so whatever is your worry, you will end up. And it's a very open environment. It is not a biased or just, what do you say, judging environment that we are using. And then for that reason, it will become something that is sharing and connecting for each other. And then another element that we can very much practice in every anxiety setting, not just in terms of climate anxiety, but in any anxiety setting, is that mindfulness. So there are a lot of techniques that is there available for us to be mindful. A very simple thing, my son is in his pre-KG. So then one day I saw him coming with the flower on this particular finger, picture of flower on this particular finger, and on this one, fire symbol, okay. On this, it is a fire symbol. On this, it is a flower symbol. And then I asked him what it is. And then he said, flower means we have to smell it. How? Okay, what is this? breathe in. Okay, then he has a fire symbol here. What is this? Blow out the fire. Okay, what will you do? Here, breathe out. Simple as that. Focus on your breathe. Okay, so imagine this flower and fire. So what will you do in the setting? When you feel that anxious feeling, so you have to bring it back to your own body and then its functions or understanding of it, which will help you to tackle that anxiety in the setting. So mindfulness-based interventions. Because of the lack of time, I'm going further. You can explore it further. And then definitely, at the end of the day, we have to tell that communication, collaboration, and at times sharing our grievances or our grieving stories becomes very important. Or maybe sometimes sharing our success stories also become important. All this makes us connect in the context. It all makes us empower in the context. And then being organized become the priority to address climate change. So these are few additional resources. Most of it is coming from the AL Sustainability Center for Research because they are one of the leading researchers in the world. And with that, I'm ending my session. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Alfonso, for that insightful talk and on highlighting why climate change awareness is not getting converted to climate action, and also for giving us important pointers to combat climate anxiety. In an era of information overload, it becomes important for us to be able to access reliable information and not to be misled by misinformation. So with that, I would like to welcome Ms. Sadika on her talk on debunking climate myths, effective strategies against misinformation.
I love how you use the word information overload, because I think, look at all the faces. They look saturated with information at this point, awaiting the lunch. And I understand that everything that can possibly be told to you about climate change has more or less already been told since morning. So I won't keep you for very long, and I will try to keep it very simple, explanatory, devoid of jargons. And exactly what we learned right now, I think, just so you could pay a little more attention to me, can we all just collectively take a deep breath? You know, just smell the flower and then blow the fire? Perfect. I think I would want to start with what Mala said about how climate change needs to become a dining table conversation. Especially for all of you sitting on the last benches, you know. Not only should you know and talk about climate change, but let me tell you, you should also be interested because it's really cool. We're now living in a world where if you know about climate and if you can have a conversation, you're one of the coolest people on the table. So even if you don't care as much, I'd suggest you take like serious notes and listen to what everybody said today and then regurgitate the same information in your circles. At least you'll be cool. Anyway, so now we live in a post-truth world. We all know that, right? Post-truth means that you don't really know what is fact, what is fiction. Trump, our beloved Trump from a great country, who's now again the Prime Minister, has given us this term, right? We all know post-truth means facts are increasingly dodgy. We don't know what to believe in, what not. And not just with regard to climate, but with regard to almost everything. How do we then ensure that the information that we're consuming is actually accurate? And in fact, the sad bit is, in the case of climate change, there is a severe lack of information to begin with. So we already, by default, don't know as much. And so whatever is given to us, attributing it to climate change is what we tend to kind of believe in. And that becomes a major problem. So like we do with most things, very simple, fact-checking becomes extremely crucial. We need to fact-check the information that comes to us. In fact, do that with almost everything you come across. Unless it's printed in a newspaper, sometimes even do that. I mean, day before they put out a death of this great musician and they said this person's died, turns out they hadn't, nobody confirmed. All news sources used other news sources as their sources. So really, let's not believe in anyone, let's do our own fact check. There's a whole detail of resources. I think if you can take away all the presentations that have been made today, you'll find enough links to kind of fall back on, trusted links, especially Pallavi's presentation that we saw earlier from CEW. It is a great kind of miniature syllabus from where to get all your information from, starting with net zero to, you know, where we stand, everything. So kind of do that. Ensure that you're getting all your information from really trusted sources.
The first example of lack of information, what happens when we think we kind of know without reading the entire article, we'll just read the headline and we'd believe that we know what is being talked about, is exactly, I'll just give you one small example. Also something that's been passingly kind of spoken about today in the earlier sessions. How many of us think that the floods or the water shortage that happens in Chennai is entirely because of climate change? Put your hands up. So the floods that happen in Chennai are entirely because of climate change. Whoever believes, put your hands up. Okay, the second is the floods in Bangalore. We all know Bangalore gets, how many of us think that happens entirely because of climate change? Correct? Air pollution that we have in Delhi now, in Pakistan, actually, we are one of the top polluters in the world at this point, air pollution, air quality. I come from Delhi. There's a mask in my bag right now. It's unbreathable air. How many of us think it is directly related to climate change? Hands up. Okay, now, so see, that's the thing. Climate change contributes to these problems. Climate change exacerbates them, which means it makes them worse. But climate change is not entirely responsible for causing them. And why does it matter? It matters because climate change to us sounds like a much bigger problem, right? Like polar bears and melting ice caps, and something that internationally people are working on. Of course, it's not a problem that any of us, like we've been hearing, can solve individually. It needs massive collaborative efforts from people, stakeholders across the world. So climate change seems like a much bigger issue. When we correlate our regular civic issues to climate change, we kind of make the problem sound like it's something way bigger than what your local MLA or MP can solve. When it turns out a lot of these problems are actually rooted in basic urban planning, infrastructural failures, and generic civic issues which can be solved. So I've been telling people in Delhi all the time that, pollution is political. If anybody is telling you that pollution is just an outcome of climate change and really, it's so much is happening, there's a heat wave, there's a cold wave, random words you'll hear like La Nina and El Nino, and that has something to do with pollution? Sure, maybe. But your politicians can also fix it with immediate effort. We saw this in Delhi. GRAP 4 was implemented, which is a graded action plan for clean air, and air quality improved. And then the government was under financial pressures. Of course, you can't keep the industry shut for longer. So they went back to GRAP 2, and now the air quality has been horrible for the last 2 days again. So why are people, and as was said earlier, your access to clean air is a fundamental right. Why are you being deprived of it when the system can ensure? So which is why I feel, in that sense, attributing the correct cause to the correct problem is really important, because if the attribution is slightly misplaced, the solution tends to get massively delayed, which is not something we can, at this point, in our country at least, afford. We're one of the top 5 most vulnerable countries in the world to climate change. So it can happen, it is happening everywhere else in the world, but we are the least prepared in a lot of ways to kind of deal with it. So why is calling all of these issues or directly attributing them to climate a problem? So I feel that it essentially skips accountability. You need to know who is causing the problem and who can solve it. Of course, you using a plastic straw will make a lot of difference. So not using a plastic straw will make a lot of difference. So you should do that, of course. But will that solve this global crisis? No. So we need to know what exactly is the problem that we're trying to solve, which is why correctly attributing stuff is extremely important. Also, I feel that another major gap that we have in terms of information and how we receive it is because climate change is relatively a much new phenomenon, and all of the studies that have been done on it come to us from the West. So the language in which we communicate climate change is English. We lack the terminology to discuss it in our local languages. So in Tamil, in Hindi, we don't have the words. We need to kind of get together, even in our circles, to understand what is the word. How do we refer to climate change? What exactly is vulnerability? What is the word for vulnerability in our languages? How do we define, say, heat wave? How is it different from other things? So language, of course, again, becomes a major problem when we try to address this issue of largely how information is coming to us. The second major issue Also, that consists a large part of how misinformation travels is greenwashing. So what happens is when you really know that also how many of us know what greenwashing is in general? Greenwashing. Greenwashing, okay. So, oh, that's great. I love the fact that, lovely. I can explain it now. So we know what whitewashing is, right? And how we use it in a language sense of the word. Like you whitewash things, you gloss over it. You make it sound like nothing ever happened. Greenwashing it is when you don't really do the work, but put like green paint literally on things to make it look like it's all eco-friendly and eco-conscious and sustainable without actually doing a large part of the work. Now that we know climate, sustainability, eco, all of these are great buzzwords, bring in a lot of money, which is why everybody kind of wants to support these words. People are having eco-friendly weddings these days. That's how cool it looks. How much of a difference does it actually make? Depends. So greenwashing is a whole scale between lying outrightly about doing the right things to kind of making your token efforts look massively great, to just outrightly cheating the people and saying that this will fix the environment when it will actually not do anything. So some of the common examples where we see greenwashing, which we can easily spot in our lives around us, is the first is small, minuscule efforts. So you'll do the bare minimum, and it'll actually not translate to anything, but you will advertise it as if it's done a lot, and that's a lot of our city action plans, you know, don't really translate to much, but the government puts in a lot of money. That is not entirely greenwashing, of course, but the impact is not as huge as it is made to seem. Token efforts, small little things that people do. For instance, it's a small example. I was talking, you know, there are a lot of these studies that calculate the carbon footprint of each event. You know, like there are massive conference of parties is one such, COP, which was mentioned earlier, or weddings, just big events, and you calculate how much emissions were kind of incurred during the course of this event. So this event had entirely just glass bottles, which was considered to be a great thing. We would all assume that glass bottles are a great solution. We should all switch. However, it turns out that, especially for that event, the amount of fuel that was used to transport glass bottles, because they're much heavier, was a lot more. Secondly, you have to reuse the bottle, so the amount of water and detergent that it requires to actually wash and reuse the bottles was much higher. So the collective carbon cost of using a glass bottle turned out to be, for that event, much higher than actually buying plastic bottles and responsibly recycling them. So this also sometimes is really kind of dodgy, but I think it's so thin, it's not something we can actually weigh. So we should be a little more mindful when we're thinking of these things. Next thing is carbon credits. Now it's very complicated. I don't think if we should get into it, but I'll just be very quickly telling you. There's a thing called carbon markets. Apparently what happens is you can sell carbon in the air and oxygen in the air. How it works is, I'm a person, you're a person, I pollute a lot. I want to drive 5 cars, you have no car. So I'll tell you, you drive no car for the rest of your life, and you will earn carbon credits for not driving it because you're not damaging the environment. On the other hand, I will give you money, buy your carbon credits, your great brownie points from the environment, utilize them, and drive 5 cars myself. This happens clearly. The global south, the third world countries, the lower side of the map is where people are kind of asked to lower their aspirations, not pollute as much. So the ones who've polluted all these years can go in and pollute more. So this term, when you generate, it's called carbon credit. Now a lot of companies in India, it's happened, gathered these carbon credits, right? Farmers were told to farm in different ways, so carbon credits could be generated. Now there are scores of carbon credits lying around that nobody wants to buy internationally because they meet no standards. So it was made to seem like these carbon credits are really kind of reducing emissions when they actually weren't. So this is again one way greenwashing works. Afforestation, massive thing, massive. All my life we all think that planting trees. In fact, even the CAG key findings show that planting trees is apparently one of the biggest, we believe, most people believe that it's one of the most effective ways to kind of save the environment. The cost of, also it works in a deforestation context, right? You cut trees, businesses cut trees, and they're told to plant as many trees elsewhere. First of all, you can't really plant forests. Forests are not just trees, it's a whole ecosystem, animals, birds, you're cutting all of that, you can't really take it from one place, put it somewhere else. Whole other story. Regardless, again, the carbon cost of planting these trees, watering them over a period of time, is insane. Because where is this water coming from? You'll have to put in tankers. The government deploys huge tankers which use fuel, which goes to a place, draws water, comes, waters these trees, and then we say, oh great, we've planted like 1,000 trees. Actually, how much of a difference did it make, and how much did it actually damage the environment? Again, parts of it, greenwashing. Big corporates tend to do this, CSR activities, they'll tell you they're doing some great stuff, educating people. Turns out it's all greenwashing. Fashion brands do that quite a bit. We all know of H&M, right? H&M, Zara. So H&M has this climate conscious line. Clothes that are made of like great linen, natural dyes, natural fabrics, everything's great. Turns out it's all exploitative labor from Bangladesh being exported. Horrible stuff. You can look it up, Google it. It's all over the place. So you might think that you're doing a great job by buying one H&M climate conscious shirt. You've done your bit. But if you read up on what it took to make that climate conscious shirt, you will not be very happy. So what is the better thing to do here? Kind of buy basic stuff. Buy white shirts and black shirts. Wear them as often as you can. Style them over and over again. Try to buy less instead of buying more and buying supposedly climate conscious. We also need to look at the nuance of things, how definitions really play a role. This is a little boring. I hope you guys are not bored by this. But how we define actual things that are happening, floods and droughts and stuff like that, also misinformation plays a great role. So we did a story where we discussed how Bundelkhand is one of the poorest areas of the country, bordering Madhya Pradesh and Uttar Pradesh, 7 districts in UP, 5 districts in MP. Collectively, Bundelkhand has seen some of the worst droughts that the country has ever seen. So we tried to do the story there. The government's definition of drought is technically correct, right? Because the government calculates drought and drought damage based on crop loss. However, crop loss cannot be the only metric of calculating how much, like the damage caused by the drought, right? Schools are shut. There's an induced economy in every village. So if there's a drought, people vacate the village and go elsewhere. Water shortages keep you from going to schools. Life comes to a standstill. There is a cost to all of that. People don't have disposable income because these are agrarian economies. The entire village is only making money through agriculture. When people don't have disposable income, they don't have much to spend. So it becomes a whole cycle. And the definition of what we define as drought and how we calculate the impact and damages of drought is kind of, again, not technically misinformation, but that's the kind of information that's not correct anymore. Because of which what happens is there's a drought in the village, but the government believes there is no drought. So in the government files, you will not find that drought, but the villagers will tell you that they have no water, stuff like that. Actual impact. Okay, now, so in general, we believe that climate change is melting ice caps, polar bears, extreme weather events, disasters. We also need to look at the nuance of how things impact us and our lives and things around us and kind of make that correlation, causation about how these disaster events are actually way beyond that. So for instance, yes, I will wrap, see, last page. So so cyclone, we think cyclone causes what? Loss of life, property, stuff like that. Humans, in general, cyclones have, I did a story, probably will share the link later if any of you wants. Cyclones have been, data tells us, and also on ground one can find, leads to an increase in the cases of human trafficking. So women and girls and boys are both being trafficked in heavy numbers in vulnerable areas like Sundarbans, right, like after every cyclone. One will never be able to make this correlation, but we need to understand that a cyclone, way beyond just the disaster impacts of it, also kind of shifts the socio-dynamic fabric of the society. What happens is it leaves them vulnerable, even more vulnerable, opens the opportunity up for people who want to take these women away, and then a lot of people, I mean, human trafficking numbers really rise. So we need to start making these connections, like heat is not just heat in terms of agriculture, but also higher temperatures beyond certain degrees will make you less productive. those correlations. Just transition, coal mines, let's not get into that, not enough time. Essentially, we just need to realize that the information that's coming to us is highly subjective. Climate change is very complex. It's not just environment, it's not just disaster. Let's take our time, let's be patient with it, let's think twice before we link everything to climate change. And quickly before we end this, I would just want to do, because I was about like myths and what are facts, just for everybody in the room, so we go back with debunking at least a few climate myths ourselves. Just a quick raise of hands, I'll just read out a few sentences to you. Tell me if you believe they're facts or myths. Planet warming in the last 50 years has been entirely anthropogenic, which means human caused. Over the last 50 years, global warming has only been caused by human beings. Who believes that's a fact? Who believes it's a myth and nature has a role to play here? Okay, so the truth is, post-industrial revolution, of course, it was other things, but in the last 50 years has just been us. We are solely responsible. The nature is out of this game. Second, with global warming, winters will get colder. Even though the globe is warming, winters will be colder. Great, I think we've learned since the morning. Third, climate has always changed, right? We know that. That's how the dinosaurs died, is what we believe, right? Climate has been changing. So what's the new thing? The nature adapts, everybody adapts, eventually we will figure out a way. So climate has changed until this point, and it's going to change in the same way. Who believes that's a fact? Who believes that's a myth? How many of us just don't want to raise our hands anymore? Okay, so turns out, yeah, climate has been changing, but the pace at which it's happening now, unprecedented, never happened before, horrible. Dinosaurs didn't do the planet as bad as we have, so horrible. Also, over the most interesting fact is the planet has not deteriorated at the rate as it has over the last 10 years. The 10 hottest years since like the 1800s in the history of our existence have been since 2014 to 2024. Anyway, so more or less, see, largely there's not much doom. There's a lot of hope. It tends to get complicated. There are a lot of resources over the internet. One is called the Climate Change Dictionary. Look it up. I did it. I think it's pretty cool. It's pretty easy. We're explaining what net zero is, what other technical terms are. It's not difficult, but you need to have information, because information is the most empowering thing in the world. If you don't have access to the right amount of information, the right kind of information, you don't know the right questions, and questions make all the difference. So more power to all of you, especially the last rows. I hope you guys ask the correct questions. And as Mala said, that will contribute to a resilient future. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sadika, for that session, and and how important. Again, another underlying message was interconnected systems and how everything has another impact that we don't really think of. So we're at the end of the session, and I open the floor for one question.
I am CM Jayaraman from Coimbatore. Nice talking to you. Listening to your lecture. I have a small doubt for the forum. Like the astronomy or forecasting of weather has become a fashion by many people, whether they are qualified or not. They rather create panic over the people that tomorrow is going to, in another 15 days, the Madras 15 kilometers is going to be swiped off like Dhanishkodi or something like that. Of course, they make money by YouTube and other channels. But definitely, like censor board is required for another TV channels, we have to formulate a discipline among the forecasters, whether they are qualified, they are competent enough. Otherwise, Tamil solvanga, puli varudhu, you know the story, the tiger is coming, no tiger will come. But one day tiger will come where people will be simply taken for a sleep. A discipline has to be created. Like astrology, many people have come, cine actors have come and they are forecasting, nothing has happened. Yesterday and day for yesterday, I was brooding over from Coimbatore whether to go for the seminar or not. 3 days they have been telling that heavy rain is going to be there. But unfortunately, yesterday evening said nothing for Chennai, only for Kanjipuram and Chengalpattu. Even then, I didn't get my train in time, it came 1 hour later. What is happening, nobody knows. So we have to formulate a discipline among the forecasters, take up the matter with the government, that only qualified people should predict the proper forecast and not to create a panic for the people. That's my simple question. Thank you.
Hear me now? Yeah. I completely agree. These influencers dictating weather, it's a major problem. And I think not just people who are qualified, I think it should only be the Met Department doing its job. However, the problem is this whole space opened up because of the Met Department and how inefficient they've been, causing like fishermen and farmers major losses, school closures, even though they have the wherewithal to actually do right predictions. They are not efficient with what they do. I'm so sorry to be saying it. But that's opened up this space for the private players, for all of these really completely somehow uneducated people to make vague guesses with absolutely no educational background, no academic background doing all of this. But it's not their fault. If we're driven by market forces in today's day and time, you leave that space open, somebody is going to come and take it. So I think it's the Met Department, if they start doing their job really well, nobody will watch these people. Everybody will by default cancel them.
Yeah. Before we close for lunch, we would like to thank our speakers today with a small token of mementos from our side. So we have now come to the end of the first two sessions. And the first offered valuable insights for policymakers, and the second empowered citizens with practical knowledge of sustainable living. We will now break for a much needed lunch and will reconvene sharp at 2 p.m. here in the same hall. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy your meal.